Amongst the lobbyists who clamoured and pressured the ABC to sack Antoinette Lattouf were lawyers.
After October 7th, 2023, a group of allegedly 158 Australian lawyers calling themselves Lawyers for Israel formed a WhatsApp group for the purpose of discussion and mutual support. This group included solicitors, barristers, and King's Counsels or senior counsels. In addition to being a silk, the leader of the campaign against Ms. Lattouf was a member of the Order of Australia, or AM, and holds positions of leadership across high-profile institutions in Australia and around the world. In other words, he's a pretty big deal. Due to a legal suppression order we'll tell you about in a moment, we can't tell you who it is, which in and of itself tells you what a big deal he is. So out of respect to the federal court, we shall simply call him the world's most moral KC. If you live in Australia, none of this will be news to you. So why did we make a video about it? Because there are things about this story we feel have not received the scrutiny and attention they deserve. And it's not the specifics about what happened to Ms. Lattouf. It's not even the impact her treatment has had on the reputation of the ABC.
I'm wondering how the sacking of Antoinette Lattouf accords with those responsibilities.
Or are we going to muzzle ourselves? Is that the depths you've sunk to?
Which we have already covered in another video. It's what all this says about us, about Australia, about the integrity of our legal system, the health of our democracy and politics, and most important, about our decency.
What I think is a big issue here is the assumptions that are being made. You're a bad person, that you condone genocide, that you want thousands of children to die, and that is absolutely not true.
That's Melbourne lawyer Alana Kushnir, who is a member of Lawyers for Israel, as well as another chat group called Jewish Creatives and Academics, which we'll talk about in a moment. And whatever her views on Gaza, Israel, or Antoinette Lattouf, we agree with her on this point. People shouldn't form assumptions, not about Zionists or about anti-Zionists, not about Jews or about Muslims or Palestinians or Israelis, not about anybody. What a shame, therefore, that Ms. Kushnir didn't have that epiphany back on Sunday, December 17, 2023. Imagine how different the world would be today, for all of us, including Ms. Kushnir.
I have had less and less public opportunity.
Can you see the irony here? Now, we don't know Ms. Kushnir, and we'll be honest, she seems to us like a perfectly lovely woman. That's why we find this story so baffling. Does she really not recognize the irony of this moment? How is it possible that she doesn't know that many Australians, so many Australians, have all lost opportunities in this time? Has Antoinette Lattouf not lost opportunities?
The other deplorable dimension to this situation is that the ABC has continued to blacklist Antoinette Lattouf.
Has Randa Abdel Fattah not lost opportunities? Nadine Shamali, Omar Sakr, Khalib Sabsabi, have they not lost opportunities? We could go for an hour, but are you beginning to see the picture here? Do you not see the opportunity for solidarity that's actually staring us all in the face?
I have had less and less public opportunity.
Was it really necessary for Ms. Kushnir to personally experience blacklisting herself to recognize how awful it might feel to know that someone is conspiring to get you? Did she have to experience the fear and the vulnerability of knowing that there are people white-anting your reputation and your career, and there's nothing you can do about it, nothing you can do to defend yourself because you don't even know who they are or what they are saying?
Everybody has a right to write a letter. There's nothing unlawful about writing letters.
As we've already said, how different would the world be today if, rather than role-playing the kind of cliched anti-Semitic conspiracy that Alexander III would recognize, Ms. Kushnir or someone of those 158 lawyers for Israel, even one person said, "Hey everyone, why don't we just stick to writing letters and following proper channels and procedures, and let's reserve calling up the minister for something more urgent." Then there would be no need for anyone to seek protection from the court.
The judge suppressed for 10 years the names and addresses of a group called Lawyers for Israel, who were allegedly behind the campaign of complaints against Lattouf. The judge satisfied that if their identities were known, they would be subject to vilification and harassment.
And our politicians could spend their time actually addressing the needs of ordinary Australians rather than wasting their time laying cover fire for the embarrassing and unbecoming behaviour of fellow members of Australia's elite. What would that do to social cohesion in Australia?
It's time to bring peace, not division, to our street.
They also don't want conflict brought here.
We do not need to be having our social fabric torn apart by hate.
And speaking of social cohesion, if it is true that outrage over the actions of the Lattouf Nine puts Jewish lawyers at risk of
vilification and harassment,
what stops the world's most moral KC from identifying himself, from taking full responsibility, standing up like a man, if you'll excuse the sexism, but standing up, taking responsibility like a man? Why would the world's most moral KC allow a young woman like Alana Kushnir, who's not a barrister, not a KC, not a member of the Order of Australia, not a leader with an international profile, why would he allow a young woman young enough to be his daughter to take the heat for a conspiracy that he ultimately led? Why would he allow her to be the face of his actions?
Please, I have a child. Please, I'm all she has in the world.
Why do I have the feeling that this is exactly the look that our most moral KC gave to Judge Rania when his legal team convinced him to grant that extraordinary suppression order, which we don't believe would have been granted to you or to me or to almost anyone else in Australia? I suppose we should never be surprised at the capacity for callousness and self-serving rationalization from wealthy and powerful men.
I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War.
Got a deal, Dad. Any more women?
Going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
It's always been this way. What stops the 158 members from Lawyers for Israel from identifying themselves collectively to assure that no other lawyer who happens to be Jewish
be subject to vilification and harassment,
be subject to suspicion about whether they too are in the business of secretly blacklisting fellow Australians? Whatever we think of Australians like Marnie Perlstein, Daniel Lukowitz, Sherry Markson, and many others whom we've covered in this series, and whom we've criticized in this series, in some cases quite strongly, at least they're engaging in the public marketplace of ideas openly. Why can't everyone be expected to do that? Alex Rivchin, co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, told the Sydney Morning Herald's Michael Bechelard and Callum Jaspin that, quote, the idea that his group, meaning the EJAC, or any of its members, organized or coordinated a campaign to have Ms. Lattouf sacked was, in his words, total bullshit. Now, we're happy to stipulate that the ECAJ as an organization had nothing to do with the conspiracy against Ms. Lattouf, but everyone familiar with this case knows that some of its members did. And out of respect for the court, that's all we'll say about that. The question is, why would he say that? Even if it were true, why not be man enough to say that Lawyers for Israel acted exactly as Mr. Rivkin told them to?
We're not getting pushed around anymore.
Acting in his official capacity as co-CEO of the ECAJ,
we're now seeing consequences levied against those who take action and stand against our people.
About the sorts of things Jewish Australians like Ms. Kushnir, like the Lattouf Nine, and like the world's most moral KC, ought to be doing to their fellow Australians, according to Mr. Rivchin, when they express the sorts of unacceptable views about Israel.
If someone gets up and says something terrible about Israel, terrible,
that Ms. Lattouf is guilty of having. As we've said many times in this series, we stand by Mr. Rivchin's right to advocate for whatever policies and actions he believes Australian Jews ought to pursue vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis the Australian government, and vis-a-vis their fellow Australians. It's a free country. It's just that we expect leaders...
Remember that Captain Darling and I are behind you.
and frankly, men, to stand behind their actions and the consequences of the actions they advocate.
About 35 miles behind.
We tend to not like the kind of leader who sends diggers into machine gun fire while sitting back, keeping his own bum safe while it all plays out, and not even having the curiosity to understand what went wrong. That's Australian values as this migrant understands them.
That is actually endangering all of us, because non-Jews in the community see mainstream Jewish organisations bullying and trying to silence critical views.
And doing so in secret, only to scurry and hide the moment someone turns on the light.
Which in my view leads to actual anti-Semitism.
Whether or not the actions that Mr. Rivkin encouraged and which some of his peers engaged in has contributed to Jewish safety or diminished Jewish safety is a question that Mr. Rivkin will have to debate with his own stakeholders.